Hello, everyone. My name is Jim Posner, and I'm the founder and host of the Don't Panic Project. Every week, we will be providing engaging conversations to help empower, inspire, and educate people suffering from anxiety and depression. Today's guest is Bob Litwin. Bob is a champion tennis player, a performance coach, and a best-selling author. He recently wrote the book, Live the Best Story of Your Life, A World Champion's Guide to Lasting Change. And one of the main premises of the book is that we can change the stories we've been telling ourselves about who we are with stories about who we would like to become. And in his own words, change can be easy and change can be fast. So welcome, Bob.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Nice to be with you today.
All right, great. So before we get into how to change our stories, let's hear your story. You're a world champion tennis player. You're a performance coach for some really well-known athletes and business professionals. How did you get here? Tell us about your journey.
Well, I think that there was sort of a three-part journey, all happening at, sort of similar times. One was, I was a tennis pro at these very nice clubs on Long Island, starting when I was in my mid-20s. I'd been a school teacher actually for a couple of years, but found that teaching tennis was actually more financially sustainable. And I really liked it. It was a lot of fun doing it. But there was a big but, which was that this was a career that was a somewhat low self-esteem career, because I was hired help with people that had a lot. At least they appeared to have a lot financially. They had a lot financially, so vertically they were very successful. And I felt like, not equal in any way. And interestingly, I grew up in a very healthy financial environment. I grew up in Great Neck on Long Island. And many of the people that were members of these clubs were people I went to school with. And they had gone into other fields that were considered more traditional, lawyers, doctors, dentists, Wall Street, and so forth. And here I was teaching tennis to them. And, not those people, but other people at the club, they didn't even know my name. It was like I was the pro. And I was working weekends. I was working on holidays. And when it was time for the parent-child tournament that I would run on Father's Day, I would feel like that I was neglecting my own kids. And even if I had them come to hang out with me, they would end up playing with somebody else's parent because I had to run the tournament. So there was a lot of angst for me in a career that was really enjoyable. And at a certain point, I realized, I'm just not happy doing this, and yet there's a lot of good stuff about it. And I started to think about what was good. And I realized that there were certain things. One was how lucky for me that I was playing tennis all day for work. Second, the people that came to me, it was the best hour of their week compared to all these other things they were doing. It's I can't wait for my tennis lesson. So that was a really good thing. I was unbelievably fit because I was running around all day long. But the biggest thing that I realized was that I was teaching people things, not so much the tennis, but the stuff that was in between the tennis on the court. Come on, stay positive. Keep your head in the game. Relax under pressure. I was teaching them these things sort of automatically because I had this alchemy with these students where they would always I can't do it. And I would convince them why they could, what they needed to think about. And I realized wow, I'm teaching these people that I think are hugely successful about stuff that they don't know anything about, and that I was teaching them life skills. And everything shifted for me at that point in terms of my own feeling of what I was doing. I felt like high value. They were telling me about my value, but I never believed it because I was hitting tennis balls. So that took me on a journey that ended up being a performance coach for quite a few successful athletes, business people, people in every walk of life, just even if they weren't necessarily working. I was working with people who were really good to help them squeeze out the extra 5, 3, 2, or 1% to be the best versions of themselves. And these were the same people that are now calling me up that didn't know my name. And now they're like, Bob, can you work with me? So that was one piece of my story that had to do with going from like what felt like 0 to 100. I started playing tennis tournaments in my late 20s. I played a bit in high school, but I wasn't really a serious player. I didn't take lessons. I went to Michigan. I didn't play on the team. I wasn't good enough, or I didn't think I was good enough. And in my late 20s here, I was giving tennis lessons to all these people, and I couldn't understand why they were having such a hard time executing the plan. Like they would get nervous and everything. I said, I'm going to play some tournaments to find out like what the deal is. And then I proceeded to lose for like several years in a row, except if I played somebody who was really way below me, and I was able to fumble my way through a win. But I was losing to people that were better than me, losing to people that were the same as me, and also losing to people worse than me, as far as what it appeared to me. And I started using my own systems, which is an interesting thing. You as a coach, me as a coach, we have to make sure that we are actually doing the things and experiencing the things that we're asking other people to do and experience. And that, at least for me, that was like, to create more credibility, I needed to go into the fire that they were in, and then to either demonstrate that it was doable or say like, gee, this is a lot harder than I thought. Let me work with you on that. And as I was working on developing my own mental skills, which meant I was getting rid of things that were interfering mentally, like negative thinking, that's like, 101 in the course. Right. But dealing with how do you relax when you perceive there's pressure, what can you do? I started to do these things, and eventually I started to win. I entered in the 35 and over, which is the youngest senior age group. And for 4 years, again, I was winning locally, but I couldn't win on the national level. And it wasn't my level. It was that my brain got in the way. Progressively, I kept working on it. When I hit 40, I won my first national title, the 35 and over national championships, which was unusual because I was at the end of that age group. 6 months later, I won the national 40 and over national championships. And it was like, who is this guy? Where did he come from? And then progressively, I kept putting one foot in front of the other. And as you know, you've read my book, Kaizen is about ongoing incremental improvement. I was committed to that. I wasn't like seeing number one in front of me as much as let me see what the next step is. I started beating people that were a little ahead of me. I climbed on top of their shoulders, took on the next one. And fast forward, at 55, I ended up winning the world championships and being number one in the world. And of course, people were like, all my friends were like crazed, like, oh my God, this is unbelievable. But what they didn't realize, although they knew it, was that this was a 20-year journey. And really, it's not like I was standing at the bottom of the mountain and I jumped to the top in one move. That before I was number one, I was number three. And before I was number three, I was number five. So to me, I never really even felt the size of the improvement until I looked backwards. I said, wow, 20 years ago, I couldn't even win. So that was the part of my life that brought me to being a highly ranked player. And I still play. I'm going into the 70 and over group this coming January. I look forward to competing on the national and international level again. And that part of my life keeps me very young. It keeps me accountable to taking care of myself, to continuing to like stay sharp mentally, because I don't enter a tournament to just show up. It's not that I have to win it, but I want to be prepared to win. So that's like all day, every day, I'm doing things that lead me to being in the best possible space for that. The third thing, I guess this is a long story, but is that when I was about 60, my wife, Carol, was the love of my life. We had this amazing relationship. She got cancer. She lived for 3 years. At the end, she had 3 or 4 really, really tough months. And what I found during that period was that all the training that I had been doing in my life to be good at winning tennis matches and being resilient and staying positive, all that training, which I thought was for tennis, was for this match. This was the toughest match I ever had to play, where the outcome wasn't even in doubt. It really wasn't in doubt as we moved farther into it. And yet I kept playing the game the right way. And I kept good posture. metaphorically.
Right.
I stayed mentally strong. I continued to like do the things that kept me strong. I welcomed this awful period of my life. I welcomed the adversity and I danced with it. And I feel like I did a great job there. And I think that that was like the most important experience that I've ever had in my life to get me where I am now. So I feel, it sounds strange, but in some way I feel blessed that this was something that happened in my life. Frankly, I'd wish to not be as evolved as I am now as a result of that, and for Carol to still be with me, but that's just not the way it is. And I've been very fortunate to live the best story of my life by meeting Joanne and getting married and having like 8 grandchildren and 5 daughters between us. So that's like how I got here. Tennis, career, and this amazing relationship that ended, that I lost.
So, I mean, it sounds like, you were really writing this story for years, and basically in the last couple of years, you actually put it down in the book. Well, can you tell us the main premise about the book, about how to go about writing a new story and creating a new life? Essentially, I guess it's a new mission statement.
Yeah. Well, just like not being picky, but when I was writing the book, that word mission obviously came up a lot because this is about putting something out in front of you and moving towards it. And in my experience, that word mission creates some sort of tension for people and like nervousness about putting it out there because it's such a big thing somehow. I mean, there are many missions.
Right. Yeah, the word mission does kind of connotate this grandiose feel almost.
Yeah, and I think, it's the same thing with the word goals. I'm a little bit hesitant to even use the word goals because they can be very, very big, which is fine, but they seem to create some sort of internal pressure and judgment about like, I'm not quite getting there. So when I was writing the book, I was playing around with what is the word that might be more engaging, more welcoming, easier to play around with, to adjust. And stories, I didn't come up with the word stories, obviously, or even the concept of writing stories, but it felt like the right word. It was a lot more, it felt more like a pillow, a soft pillow that we could work with, and that it was okay to adapt the story, whereas goals was like, oh, well, you mean you're lowering your goal? It's like, oh, sorry, that was a little too big a goal, and I'm not getting it. But with stories, you can play around with it. But the concept of the book is this. All of us, in my opinion, have stories that we've been telling ourselves and other people for years that provide explanations for why we are not X, why we haven't done X, why we are where we are. And the stories are really, very often they're true. Like for me, my story in tennis was, well, how can I beat players who played in college and on the tour? I never took tennis lessons. Well, I never took tennis lessons was true. It was a true thing. But it was also a limiting story. So, that was like a small block for me in being able to win because I already had my reason, explanation, excuse for losing. They took a lot of lessons. I didn't. I don't have enough time. I'm an impatient person, or whatever the stories are. And these stories were like often planted in our brain by people who are really helpful to us, but unintentionally were giving us stuff that was not really productive. I remember being like 15, 16 years old. It'd be a weekend. What do you think I'd be doing on the middle of the day on the weekend? I was lying on the couch, right?
Yep.
Doing like watching sports or something. And my mom would come in and say, like, what are you doing? It's like, you're watching the game. She's like, look, it's beautiful out. Get up, go into town and pick this stuff up for me and then rake the leaves. And it's like, and I was told over and over again that I was lazy by that interaction or even by the actual words. You're lazy, you've got to be more motivated. But really, what was I? I was a teenager.
Right.
That's what I was. I mean, the definition of teenager is lying on the couch and having to be told to do things. So the stories that we're told often get planted and then they grow and the roots go deep. and then they become the way we are. So what I realized when I was teaching tennis especially was like these stories, which are so limiting, even if they're true, they could be changed because they're just the way we're describing why our action is the way it is. I'm risk averse. Okay. What if you flipped the story and just had a different story that like I'm a risk taker, or instead of I'm lazy being I relax on weekends, but I hit the floor running on weekdays. Not true necessarily when you write the story, but what it does is it creates like the difference between where you are here and where you want to go. And it actually provides, without realizing it, a map. It doesn't give you the details of the map. It gives you your place of origin and your place of destination. And we're pretty good when we look at a map and know where we're starting, where we're finishing, how we can get from one to the other. Using as an example, let's say, I work with a lot of hedge fund guys that are very impatient,
Right.
It's like they're very impatient and they want everything right now. So there's this one guy that I work with who says to me, oh, I'm so impatient. I'm like, so how's that story working for you? Well, I've always been impatient. I was born impatient. Like, I even delivered early, it's like I came out a month early. It's like, I've always been this way. And it's like, it's really hard to change. I'm like, maybe it is. But like, you're just telling a story around the way you are. What if we flip the story to, I'm infinitely patient? I know, Bob, but I'm not. I know you're not. It's like, I know you're impatient. It doesn't work for you. Your girlfriend's not happy about it. Your kids don't listen to you. And work, people get uptight around you and can't work well. So if you want to change it, let's play with the idea of I'm infinitely patient. Okay, fine. How do I do that? I said, well, I don't know. I know what I would do, but I'm not going to tell you what I would do. If you were somebody who was patient, what would be something you might do? Just like take a shot at it. And this guy said I guess I could count to 10. I said, fine. Okay. So you do know how to do something. Could you, the next time you're waiting for the elevator to come up to the 28th floor, instead of hitting the button 10 times, could you instead hit it once and then count to 10? And then your level of impatience might come up. You might hit the button again. Count to 10. Practice. See where it takes you. Like anything else, if you practice, it's almost impossible to not get better if you practice something. In fact, it's almost guaranteed you will change if you practice something. You've just been practicing the wrong thing. You've been practicing impatience. You've gotten great at it. Terrific. You rank number 1 in the world in impatience, but it's not working for you. So the concept is very simple. What are the stories that you are telling that are not working? Most people know. Most people do know. If they're given the opportunity, just think about it. Well, it's like I never did this or never did that, or my parents were this way, or it's like I was an only child, or I was like one of 7. It's like people have their stories about why they are where they are. Write them down. Keep it simple. It doesn't need to be a long narrative. It's not a life story. You can pick one area of your life. You can pick work, health, money, contribution, relationship. You can take small things like one word, I'm an impatient person. And you can write a new story about it that's basically a fabrication. You're kind of BSing yourself and saying, this is who I am. And just, Jim, one thing that I want to make sure that I make clear in this is that it's not a new story of what you're going to do. It's a story of who you know you need to be in order to do the things you want to do. I want to start a hedge fund. Okay, well, that's what you want to do. It's hard to just kind of do that. Who do you need to be to start a hedge fund? Well, I need to be personable. I need to be confident. I need to reach out to people. I need to ask for help. It's like, that's who you need to be. So that is the new story stuff. Once you are able to become the person, Richard Branson, it's who he was more than the fact that he started Virgin Records. It's like, I want to change. I'm somebody who changes the world. Okay. Then the next thing you know, he's like, not the next thing, but he buys a 747, one used 747. He didn't decide, I'm going to own an airline. he says, I'm going to change the world. And then within that, so I'm going to change transportation because British Airways sucks, basically. And he got stuck somewhere where they had canceled a flight. And he was like, this is wrong for people. So anyway, that's the idea of the book, the concept of the book. And then there's 33 chapters in the book that I call one-on-one private coaching sessions, which are really, they're just phrases or concepts that I've said to people when they lose faith, lose hope. I'm trying, but I'm not getting anywhere. So I say things to them like, well, look back to see how far you've come. It's like, oh, you don't like that? Don't use it. Here's another one. Because when you're a coach, you use a lot of that. You do anything you can to keep people in the game. So 33 just happened to be a number that we came up, the publisher, my editor, and I came up with because it's the number of vertebrae in the spine. Like, yes.
Support system.
Yeah.
Metaphor for the support system, supporting yourself, supporting your life. I love it.
Yeah.
I don't know if I realized that. But I have to say, you're selling, I think you're being a little, almost self-deprecating in a sense. Like it's the 33 little chapters are all amazing tips and strategies, and most of them are scientifically backed methods of achieving peak performance. Things that have been studied, and I think more recently than not. A lot of these things, such as visualization and gratitude, Kaizen. Incorporating all different types of mindfulness into your life, and I want to actually ask you about a few of those, so our listeners can learn how to incorporate some of them into their life. And I'm also really curious. So let me start out with gratitude. I do practice gratitude. It is, I teach and practice mindfulness, and gratitude is definitely a cornerstone of a good mindfulness practice. And there are many ways to practice it. Now, in your book, you talk about, you work with a big hedge fund in New York, and you're the performance coach there. You spend several days a month with this large group of traders and type A personalities. So what's the response like when you tell these, type A trader personalities to write down gratitudes? And I'm just curious how it goes.
Well, the way it started, I've always known about gratitudes, and I never really had any systematic approach to it personally, except to like every now and then say, here's what I'm grateful for, or like, so I had read an article by Sean Aker, who is the Harvard professor whose field is positive psychology. And he wrote an article about gratitudes, and I was just kind of like, yeah, gratitudes, they're great, but they also can improve people's performance. And I'm performance driven, not as much spiritually driven as much as performance driven. I think I am spiritually driven, but the people I'm working with could care less about spiritual stuff.
Right.
But they do want to have better P&L, profit and loss.
Right.
And here Sean Aker is talking about people's performance can be better if they practice gratitudes, and it becomes part of what they do, because as you practice something, it falls into your being. So I took this article and I sent it to all the people in the firm with a note saying, you guys think that I do everything like that I'm supposed to do that makes a big difference, but I don't. But now I've read this article, and I'm telling you right now, I am going to start writing gratitudes, because I'm all about wanting great performance, both in my tennis, in my life, and as a coach. And I challenge each one of you to just, in the next day, to write 5 gratitudes and send it back to me as an email. And then, like a day went by, and like of the 70 people, maybe 25% did it. I sent another email, and I said, like, what's the deal? I was like, you can't think of 5 things you're grateful for? I was like embarrassing those that didn't do it. I said, just write the 5 gratitudes. I'm not asking you to do anything else. And basically I got just about everybody to do it, to send me 5 gratitudes. I kept it between that person and me. I didn't share theirs with anybody else. But I did look at all of them, and I found that there were some commonalities. And then I kind of distributed those commonalities. I said, interesting, in this particular world, these are some specific gratitudes that pop up amongst a lot of you. You guys want to share this. I said, so we're not done. I sent another email saying, it's almost Thanksgiving. Let's make sure that, those of you who want, at Thanksgiving, the normal day, at the table, announce that at work, you were forced to write 5 gratitudes, and maybe you can ask other people to do it, then be done with it. They kept thinking this was it. Then after that, I wrote another email. I said, I'm going to challenge each of you to write 5 gratitudes every day for 30 days. I'm going to do it. And I will happily send my gratitudes to all of you in an email. I'm not embarrassed about them, or I don't want to share them. And what happened was people started getting in line. But my approach to it wasn't like, you need to write gratitudes because it's going to make a big difference in your life, because people don't want that kind of advice. But I sort of drew them into it with this sort of step-by-step approach of let's do it once. Let's see what it's like. Okay, as a team, let's do it every day for 30 days. There was some space between the initial thing and me coming in with the big bat, basically. And then as I do in coaching, I continue to bother my clients. I bother them every day. When I'd be there, I'd be like, hey, what's involved? I mean, why aren't you doing this? I mean, do you think that it's going to make you worse? The risk is that you're going to use up some lead in your pencil.
Right.
That's the big risk. Or you're going to use up one tiny bit of memory in your phone by writing 5 gratitudes. And I would really kind of lean on them. It felt important, so I kept pushing them on it. And now I think that, there's a bunch of them that do it all the time. Some don't do it, but just a reminder for them, then they'll do it right away.
So I just want to take a quick moment to read from chapter 12 in your book so people can understand, because I just want to read so people understand the genuine science and research behind this. And it comes out of another person's book who you cite, Robert Emmons, who wrote the book Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier. And some of his findings are amazing. Lower blood pressure, improved immune function, and better sleep. Gratitude reduces the risk of depression, anxiety, and substance abuse disorders. It helps prevent suicide, lowers your cholesterol and blood pressure, and helps people eat better, exercise more, and take better care of themselves. So, yeah. To
otherwise, what's the point of doing it? It's but also, I think that, you and I know in our business that you need to be able to hit the hot button for people. Yes. And all of those things that Ames mentioned may be irrelevant to people who work in a particular field.
Right.
The most important thing to them, I don't judge it, is that they're making a lot of money.
Right.
And if their blood pressure is high, they don't really, it's not that they don't care. They don't want to deal with that. So me trying to sell them on gratitudes is totally about, if you write gratitudes, your P&L may very well be better than it was before. And when they say to me, well, I don't understand why. And I say, well, look, you're not doing the research. That's my job. I'm doing the research. I'm bringing you some information. If you feel that I'm a good coach for you, you're not going to ask me why that much, because you don't have the time. Do you really want to know why the light goes on when you turn on the switch? No. Right. You want the light to go on. You're not but I don't understand why. How does it happen?
Yeah, so to that point, I'm just going to quickly read the quote that you have in your book at the beginning of this chapter on gratitude by Oprah, to her kind of description of how it can bring more money or things into your life. Yeah. What you focus on expands, and when you focus on the goodness in your life, you create more of it. Opportunities, relationships, even money flowed my way when I learned to be grateful, no matter what happened in my life. Oprah Winfrey. So, you know,
if I could add to that, when Carol was sick, every day I did get up and write my gratitudes. And it wasn't that I wrote 5, it's that I wrote until I was done. But my gratitudes weren't necessarily like, oh, I'm grateful for family. It was that. Grateful for the love that I have. That was there too. But it also might have been, I feel grateful that when I wake up in the morning, I can drink water out of the tap and not get sick.
Yeah.
Or it might even be a small thing, like I'm grateful that I got a good parking spot when I went to the station this morning when I was a little bit late. Or I'm grateful I remembered to bring an umbrella and it rained today. So it's not the size of the gratitude. It's the fact that as you continue to search for what you're grateful for, you're shifting your whole view of the world of like, there's so much good out there. And as you know, maybe like 3/4 or whatever the percentages of our thoughts generally are negative.
It's actually 80% are negative and recurring. So
and recurring, obsessive, and useless.
Yes, exactly.
So by doing gratitudes, by just like searching for gratitudes, you may be shifting that percentage to like 30/70 or 35/65. Yeah. And you wake up and you do experience more blue skies. You know that.
There's a lot of ways to practice gratitude also. You don't necessarily just have to write down 5 gratitudes. You can, the truth is, I met you because of a gratitude practice that I embarked on. I decided that anytime I read a book or a magazine article that I really enjoyed and felt like I got a lot out of, I was going to write a thank you note to the author. And that's how I met you. And we've had a lot of conversations now. I never would have met you if I didn't write that quick little note. And you've become a little, you've become a bit of a mentor for me. We text each other with ideas. And I owe that to gratitude. Saying thank you to the person who gets your coffee. What it does is it flips the switch. It makes you, it takes you to a place of positivity is really, really what it does. So by acknowledging those little things. And it's powerful.
Can I add something to this? Because one of the things that I'm sort of chewing on right now is like people say to me, what's the most important tip you've got?
Right. But it's actually one of the questions. I wouldn't say most important, but for you, one of the more useful ones. But anyway.
Yeah. So I've been kind of like refining things down from the 33 things to the 5 things to like the 3 things. And to me, at least right now, I'm feeling that the single most powerful way of thinking, way of being, thing to think about that makes the biggest difference is to be accepting of the isness of the whole chaos of our lives and the world, the universe. That so many things happen that we don't want to have happen, whether it's sitting in traffic or somebody gets sick or you're flying somewhere and it's snowing. Just things that happen that just don't fit in with life being simple and a straight line all the time. That by accepting, and this is not a word, I mean, accepting is a state. And by accepting the isness of a situation, which is the same thing as saying not being resistant, saying like, I wish it weren't this way. Why is this happening? It shouldn't be happening. By not being resistant, by being accepting, you reduce a lot of negative mental commentary. Being that, as you say, 80% of our thoughts are negative, if we reduce our negative commentary by being accepting of things, because when we're not accepting, that's when we're complaining mentally about things. When we're accepting, we don't have as many negative thoughts going on. That 80% becomes like available. And it's not that positive thoughts flow into the 80% because we pretty much are not that positive in the way we think. We don't think like, oh, good, I made that traffic light. We do think, I can't believe I missed the light. That 80% can be zoned because when we're out of thought, we're in presence. When we're present, we're often at our best in terms of what we're doing.
Yeah.
Most of our biggest and most important experiences occurred when we were in the present, lying and looking at the sky when we were a kid. When we're present, we're often at our best. When we're working in presence, work becomes effortless. And all of a sudden, acceptance leads to something that I aspire to, which is a life of effortless effort. So gratitude is a positive thing that tends to reduce negative thoughts, which then opens you up to being in Shoshin, which is another chapter of mine about being in the present and experiencing things as if it's the first time, having the wow factor all the time. So I think gratitudes support that in coming in from another direction.
Definitely. So we are running a little tight on time, but I want to go to just one more, again, there's 33 amazing, kind of coaching strategies in this book. And I do think they are all amazing. So I want to talk about one other, though. You just were touching on quieting the mind. And, as a very competitive tennis player, I love the one passage in there, how you talk about in between tennis points, how when you're on the court, you have this space and your mind typically would wander, and maybe you start to beat yourself up or worry about, I can't believe I made this bad shot, or start to obsess about what you should do next. And that is detrimental to your performance. And that's very metaphorical for life as well, right? We start to tell ourselves all these stories. But you came up with a methodology to basically be in the moment and quiet the mind. And what you came up with was just listening for the birds in between points. And I love that. And that is a really mindfulness in action. You're making this decision to bring awareness to my thoughts are kind of going out of control and they're useless. So let me use something as an anchor to ground myself and clear my mind.
And it has to be something that requires attention. Like it's not, you can't just think about something that's easy to think about. You pick something that's hard. And even that came as a result of the fact that observing my breath was getting old. It was like, I would think I'd be observing my breath. I needed something harder. And if I couldn't hear the birds, or I was hearing the birds pretty regularly, then I'd try and hear the sound of the wind going through the leaves. That's really hard to hear. And I was trying so hard to do it that brought me into focus. So there are a lot of ways, there are a lot of things that we can do in the day. I often say to people, like, if you want to practice being centered, listen to the sound of your door slam when you get in the car. It's like, or like, as you might know, like listen or look to feel this, what it feels like when your foot hits the ground when you're walking. And these are things we do all the time.
Right.
Noticing something that's there. It's easy.
And the real point also is that when you do this, your cortisol levels drop, which is your stress hormone. You tend to start to breathe more into the diaphragm. You become more relaxed. So by doing some of these little things we're talking about, just listening for the birds or paying attention to certain sounds, it quiets your mind. And if you do that before you take a test or you go into an interview while you're sitting there waiting, more than likely you're going to perform better in that test or in that interview or in the next, point in the tennis match.
Right.
Because you're quieting that monkey mind, which...
Yeah. And I definitely skip over a lot of the stuff that is in between the noise and the quiet. To me, it's like, I'm going to focus on my breath. I'm going to play better. And yeah, cortisol levels and all that's going on too. But to me, that I could get hung up on that stuff too. It's like,
right.
Cortisol levels? Like, no, It's like, I take a deep breath. I play better.
I tend to throw those little science tidbits in to kind of get people to
Right.
try. You know, some people need a little more buy-in, so
Yes.
you throw some of the research in behind it, and they're like,
No,
oh,
I think
so
it's a
there's
good
something that
idea.
really happens in my body that's
Yeah.
going on to calm me down. And
Yeah, I think the reason with certain people I stay away from it is that the people who are skeptical are going to find, they're going to say like, well, what percentage of people does the cortisol level change? So like, seriously? It's like,
yeah, right. It's like,
those people that ask for data usually are looking for a reason to not do the thing that I'm suggesting. So it's like,
that's so
I'm
true.
like, all right, then don't do it. It's like I'm going to do it. I'm going to win the match. You don't have to do it. So
Yeah. All right,
I
Bob.
think you're doing great work. I really
Thank
do.
you.
I'm always so excited when there are other people out there. There aren't that many of us, really. I mean, we're still a new industry and growing.
And learning every day, no doubt. I really want to thank you for your time here. I really, really appreciate it. Everybody, again, Bob Litwin, Live the Best Story of Your Life, A World Champion's Guide to Lasting Change. I don't know if the book shows up backwards on the computer.
No, it's
okay. So in any event, it's a great book. I kid you not. I've read this 3 times. I have marked it up all over. I've found great tips and things I've even incorporated into my teaching. It's just a great book. And
well,
if one or two of the things resonate with somebody, then it's well worth the time. And it's a really good, quick read also.
Thanks.
So,
I feel fortunate that it came out well.
yeah, it really did. So
Thanks
again for your time. Do you have anything coming up? Any new projects? Any new tennis tournaments?
Yeah, my project is like today to continue to work on a life of effortless effort. I can
There you
always
go.
be working on it, and I can always be working on being a little bit, be good to people.
I love your shirt, no doubt.
I mean, there's plenty that I can do today that's going to raise my game over where it was yesterday, and that's my personal mission is to be better today than I was yesterday. So that's what's coming up, and then big stuff, yeah, for sure, always.
All right, Bob. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.